Are you successful? Do you want to be successful? Do you consider yourself happy? I mean, really happy and or successful? Well, here's somebody who can give us some better perspective on that and where you might be and how she got there. This is Angie Dobransky. She's speaker, trainer, and a success coach. Welcome, Angie.
Thanks, Chris. I'm glad to be here.
It is such a pleasure to have you. Can you tell us what got you started doing this and how long you've been doing it?
Back in 2007, I had my real corporate crisis moment where I knew I needed to get out. And luckily, somebody introduced me to coaching, and I'd never heard of it. Once I discovered it, I knew it was what I was supposed to do. And I quit my corporate job as a single mom with a 14-year-old and started a coaching business. I know it was a little insane, but it's worked out okay in the long run.
Tell us, you were in the fashion industry, if I'm correct there, and you did that for quite a long time. And while you were doing it, I'm going to guess you felt were you feeling fulfilled? Were you happy with what you were doing at the time? When you were doing
for sure. I spent 20 years in fashion, and I grew up in a lower middle class family. I worked my way through college. My parents, were high school graduates. They didn't even have money for me to go to school. I'd never traveled anywhere. And then I went and worked in fashion, which was so exciting. I got to learn about a whole group of people I didn't even know about and, travel the world and make decisions about how other people would dress and present themselves to the world. I mean, from where I came from, that was amazing. I considered myself an amazing success for many years until I realized it wasn't right for me anymore, which was, my corporate crisis moment.
Tell us about that. It involved your father, I think.
Yeah. So my dad had a stroke, and I got a call from the hospital. He was in Florida, and they asked me to come right away. They thought he was going to die. That's really what they thought was going to happen. He'd had a hemorrhagic stroke. And when I got down there, the doctors told me that if he didn't die right away, because most people with a hemorrhagic stroke die, but he survived with rehab, he could recover. But they needed help. They needed me. So I took a 3-month leave of absence from my job to save my father's life. Right. And they were great when I took the leave. When I called and said I need this time off, they were fantastic. But the minute I got back, they let me know I'd hurt my career by choosing my family over my company. And that's when I also knew I didn't want to work there anymore, right? Like, wow, it seems like that wasn't even a choice. What do you mean I'm going to lose my career over it? That's ridiculous.
It is. But that's how they want somebody there producing. And I suppose you can almost see their viewpoint, but it just sounds rather harsh and non-ethical or whatever you want to say. But
you know it to some extent when you're in it. I mean, I was a manager. I had to hire and fire people. I had to cost people their jobs for business decisions, right? You know it sort of, and then it happens straight to you and you're like, oh, wow. Yeah.
There's the other side of that for sure. So that was in 2007 and in 2008, you had your own business. You had as you said earlier in another conversation, you hung a shingle out, I suppose. Yeah. And you did it. But then the crisis came along, the financial crisis in 2008, and you were working, you were desperate, and it was
terrifying. I had earned everything, right? Like I came from nothing and I'd earned everything and I lost everything. I mean, I went through the recession in 2008, desperately trying to find clients, barely able to keep my head above water, using my resources to stay afloat. And by August of 2009, I didn't have the mortgage payment in the bank anymore. Everything was gone. Everything was gone. I still had my house, right? But that was my only asset at that point. And of course, it had a mortgage attached.
How did you recover?
I, had a momentary panic, right? Luckily, I had a child depending on me, which is super helpful. Somebody else will motivate you more than you can. Right. And I actually recognized that I had to save myself, right? I either had to admit defeat or save myself. And so, I did what I knew I needed to do. And I picked up the phone and I called 10 businesses every single day for a month.
Oh, yeah. That's what does it. That's what
does it. I made $16,000 in September of that year, and that was the start of, a successful coaching practice.
It's just a matter of doing it, right? Really, it's a mindset. It's all a mindset. I mean, you can either panic and fall apart, or you can get on the phone and get to work, really. And that's what you did, sounds like. So that's great. You co-authored a book. It was called Success. Wait a minute, let me get it right. Life Lessons in Success. Tell me about that experience and how that book came about.
So I met a group of people, all of us very success oriented. We did a long in-depth training program with Jack Canfield, where we're just, up leveling our skills and helping transform other people. Mm-hmm. And it was an amazing experience. We shared a lot of really deep stories with each other. And at the end of it, somebody was like, we should each write a book. And I was like, that's a lot of work. What if we each just wrote a chapter?
Oh.
And so 35 of us or 36 of us agreed to do it. And so I kind of spearheaded it, and we each wrote a chapter, a true story, something that happened to us, mm-hmm. and how we recovered from it and what we learned. They're all different. We're from all over the world, all different professions, which really means there's stories in there that, connect with everybody.
That's great. And it sounds like, and it got published earlier this year, 2021.
It did. It came out in March. In March of this year, we hit #1 in Canada and #3 in the US. So that was exciting, and continues to sell. It's very well reviewed. I've gotten really good feedback. I'm very proud of it. You put something out, you don't really know what will happen, but the feedback that I've gotten from people is really what I hoped. Things like it was really helpful to read people's stories and understand other people thought the same way I did, or, I really connected with this story or that. You share your story, you help other people find theirs.
Tell us about the story you contributed to that book.
So I wrote the story of going bankrupt, essentially, in the recession, and how absolutely terrifying that was. Mm-hmm. For someone who had really succeeded at my modest aspirations to that point and never really failed at anything, to almost lose everything was challenging. And I worked my own way through college. My parents didn't help me with that. They were proud of me, but they didn't feel it was their obligation to help me with that. And I really wanted to do better for my son, and I had lost his college fund, and that's where I was. And so that's the story that I tell. Wow. By the way, my son did go to college, and it did have a happy ending, but it was terrifying at points.
That's great.
For sure.
And it's all from basically you doing the hard work and you with the proper mindset. It's that mindset word. I hear it used a lot and bantered around a lot, but it really is the case. Positivity is king. You can wallow around in negativity forever. I mean, I have another question. Might be, how do you, when you get a client and you finally get a brand new client, somebody you haven't seen before, ever worked with before, and they're telling you that their business is down. They may even use the words, my business sucks. What do I do? This, that, and that. How do you, maybe some basics. How do you start to bring positivity out of them and get them going? How do you do that?
The first conversation really is about, well, what do you want from your business, right? So people don't, and I didn't even think about this. What I wanted from my business when I started it was a living, right? Yeah. But if I just wanted a living, I could get a job, and that's way easier than having a business. But, I give up some other freedoms, but I get a living. So, I start with a client. What do you really want? What's the life that this business is supposed to try to support? I have a client this morning, has a good sized business. We just had this conversation. Isn't the business a tool for my life? Let's talk about what my life is supposed to look like. And then we figure out, well, how can the business give that to you? Right. So like for me, I want freedom of, location and time very much in my business, because I want to be a nomad. So I need to arrange a business that gives me that, right? Other people might want a lot of money, right? So they need a business that gives them that. Other people might be trying to make more, they want to express their art or whatever. So that's really where my work starts. What are you trying to get out of the business? And then I help them build a business that makes that happen.
Once you get all those answers from the client, then you can work around it. And it sounds like you're very successful. I believe you said you had about 20 clients as of this recording right now.
I do. I have about 20 clients. I work with a lot of people for long periods of time. I have certainly made some of my clients millionaires, and I'm proud to say I've built a lot of businesses in my time.
You must get a variety then. You get solopreneurs, I'm sure, a few, and you probably get businesses of any size, really. What's the biggest one you work with at this point? My
current biggest active client probably has about 400 employees and maybe does $15 million a year in revenue. So I've actually had really large clients too, where I might work with a team or something. But, I have solopreneurs. My sweet spot is a company doing like $1 to $5 million a year, where the owners actually figured out how to make the business work, and now they want to make their vision work. That's where I can really transition.
So making the business work would come first, and the vision kind of falls into place? kind of?
Sort of. You know what happens, and because I've taken people from an idea to business too. I don't work with a lot of startups, but I have worked with some. What happens is they have a vision, then they start the business and realize they don't know how to run a business, so they got to figure out how to make the business work. Right? They got to get that skill set down. Then once the business works, then they go back to the vision. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, you start a business with some kind of vision in mind, right?
Right.
And then, but you get lost along the way, kind of, sort of in the beginning, and then you kind of get it back. And that's where you come in to help them do that.
Yeah.
That's just great. I love how that works, for sure. Any other books in your brain at this point?
I do. I actually have a book. I think I'm 20 out of my 52 chapters written so far. I try to write 1 or 2 a week. It's I'll tell you, I have the title and everything. It's called Radical Success Idea of the Week, 52 Ways to Reach Radical Success.
That'll do well. And it even fits with that sign in the background, Radical
I know.
Departure. Yeah.
Yeah. Radical Departure. That's going to be our retreats in Mexico. So on our land in Mexico, we're going to build a house and then little casitas, and we'll do retreats there.
Retreats as in for business retreats, right?
Yeah. I did one right before the pandemic as a test. I rented a place nearby, and I took 6 business women to Mexico for a week in January of 2020. And I'll tell you, it was a truly magical experience. And all of those women have thrived during the pandemic, and it's been great. That
is awesome. Now, this whole idea of everybody lost business and everybody was panicking during the pandemic and everything was closed down. I mean, I did some interviews on a podcast where Saratoga Springs, New York, and they were saying that, boy, everything went down. Of course, one was an ice cream shop, one was another of a variety type place, and everything kind of went down. But from what the kind of businesses and people you're talking to, it sounds like they would be the kind that would, I should say, thrive during a pandemic.
I think the only one of my clients who did not actually increase their profits during the pandemics was actually the one that you would have thought had the most event-proof business. So in other words, they did a service that was, they provide service to the courts, right? High need, well-established, great business, should be recession-proof, except the courts closed down.
Oh, that didn't work, did it?
Right. And they lost 90% of their revenue for a period of time. But the rest of my clients might have had a hiccup, if that at all. And then when I had a client that did association management, they might have had 25 events planned when the shutdown was happened. And they ended up, I think they put on over 800 virtual events the first year of the pandemic.
Virtual events. Do you do any of those yourself?
I haven't put any on, but I've participated as a speaker in a few and in different ways. I love the virtual world. I've been trying to live here for a long time.
And the pandemic made that happen even more. For sure.
It made the last bits of the logistics that I couldn't quite make happen. It forced them because, I had a few clients that I'd always seen in person, and they were like, I don't know how I was going to get them to agree to not see in person. And one of them just said, oh, do you think we could get together in person again? And I just said, no, that's not how I'm doing business anymore. And they were like, okay, no problem. But I would have never been able to do that without the pandemic.
Yeah. So it forced us onto Zoom and Google Meet and Microsoft Teams and all of that stuff. So that's wild. So you consider yourself pretty successful at this point. And where do we go from here? I know you got that book you're writing. So
I had the book I'm writing. I have the retreat center I'm building in Mexico. So now we're getting ready to get that building again. So I'll be launching my Radical Departure retreats. Once we get that done, I'm going to give up the DC residence and really just spend the rest of my life at the beach helping people reach their maximum success.
Okay, tell me what that's going to be like. You're in the beach, you're at the beach, and it's a nice warm day, and you got a laptop or something, and that's what you're doing. You're coaching from the beach, kind of thing.
So what, I this year with the pandemic, because we have a house at the beach in Florida that we never went to. So with the pandemic, we just started going and spending a couple months there and then a couple months here. And it's great. When I'm at the beach, I'll look at my schedule. I might go ride my bike in the morning, take a little swim, sit on the beach for an hour, come home, get dressed, sit down in front of my laptop and serve clients for the rest of the day, or vice versa. See clients in the morning and then go to the beach in the afternoon. It's great.
Well, it's nice when you can do that. You can wake up and just basically make your own schedule, make your own day. I mean, like me, I commute to the coffee pot in the morning. That's my commute. And I commute into this office, and that's this home office, which is kind of nice. But I like the concept of what you're doing. Now, anybody really with the right mindset can get to the place you are, really. And I truly believe that. everything's a mindset, and you are the example of that. So that's kind of cool.
You know, I have actually worked virtually since 1996. Even when I worked in corporate America, my job was in New York and I lived in DC.
So that was from an office, though?
Nope, that was from my home office. We
nice.
needed people all over the country, and it didn't make sense to have offices all over the country. And so people don't realize this, but big multinational companies back in the 80s and 90s had a lot of virtual employees with nothing more than very basic email and a phone.
Well, that's all they really needed. I mean, they need to get it into an office somewhere. So that's great. Angie, I think we're going to have you on again, if you'll come on. And, once the retreats get going and maybe we're closer to publishing the second book and see how things are going so far. But we're going to get a lot of the same success stories, I'm sure. But the retreats are somewhat fascinating. And I want to see if maybe we can, if you'll do it at some point. I don't know. It's probably just an isolated thing where nobody communicates outside. It's all internal. Is that how you do that?
It's a deep dive. What I know is if you take people out of their environment to a radically different place, right, where they're, pretty safe, but very uncomfortable, right? You think in a different way. Your mind activates in a different way. Right. And so I try to use that to we do, some deep work on what do you really want, right? And also push the edge of their, belief about themselves through some adventures and things to, show them that all things are possible.
Well, I would love to hear more about that once you get going on that. So I'll be in touch with you about that.
Definitely.
I want to ask you a couple of non-related questions to all of this. What is your favorite movie?
My favorite movie of all time is This Is Spinal Tap, which I was very disappointed when my son did not get it. But the whole concept of the dial goes to 11 is just such an amazing way to leave. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you have to watch the movie. This is Spinal Tap. And then forever remember to turn it up to 11.
11. Yeah.
Have you seen the movie? They ask him, they say, why is your band better? And they say, because our amps go to 11. All the other amps only go to 10.
That's awesome. I love it. Another question. If you had a time machine, like a Marty McFly DeLorean or the TARDIS from Doctor Who, and you could go back and visit a person who's not alive anymore, it could be a relative or somebody famous who's inspired you or just somebody you'd like to have a conversation with, who might that be?
I think I would go back and talk to my grandmother, who is one of the coolest women that I've ever known. And I only, since she's been gone, realized how cool she was. She raised 8 children. My grandfather had a small business. He died when 2 or 3 of her children were still teenagers, still at home. Right. She took over the business, right? Raised the kids. She just, whatever was thrown at her in life, she didn't miss a beat. And she always seemed unflappable, right? She always had her hair done. She was always dressed right. She had the best grandma advice. And boy, it'd be just great to have one last conversation with her.
Yeah. When I asked this question to all of my guests, and the overwhelming response is grandmother, grandfather, father, a relative, nobody famous usually. Angie Dobransky, you are an inspiration, speaker, trainer, success coach, and we could talk for 3 hours and never cover the same subject twice, and that's how that would go. And I appreciate you coming on the show today, and I'm going to leave you with this. Until next time, live long and prosper.
Wait, I don't do it this time.
Yeah, the right hand. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.